Hey guys, Dr. Crocker here, and welcome to Module 3 in using Greek in ministry. We are now moving closer to our application where whether you have Logos software, if you're using a free, like something like Babel Hub on your computer, you're able to bring up the Greek text in Babel Hub. But in Babel Hub, I go to the interlinear and it has the English and the Greek, and you can put your cursor over top of the Greek word and it'll parse the word for you. Now it'll use symbols where you might have to go to the parsing guide to, especially in the verbal forms, and we'll get to that. But in like Logos software, it'll literally tell you nominative, singular, genitive. It'll break down the full parsing capabilities of that particular word, and that's really a blessing for all of us because it's just hard to memorize all that you are expected to. And so I hope that you will begin now utilizing, but it'll do you no good if you don't know what the parsing words mean. And that's why we have to go through some of these noun forms like we do. And we will extensively go through the Greek verb tenses so you can understand what the writer's trying to show you. I can remember when I first took Greek, I had no concept of English grammar. I just was a terrible student in grammar. And I thought I was going to take Greek and, like overnight, I was going to become this biblical scholar because I'm learning to read the Bible in its original language. And after about the first week, I started realizing this is grammar. This is not, it didn't make me feel like a Bible scholar. It made me felt so overwhelmed because I realized I don't know English grammar. And here I'm attempting to learn Greek grammar. And my first course really was a review of English grammar, but that is a part of learning a language. Greek is a language. And so we have to negotiate nouns and verbs and direct objects and indirect objects and prepositions and pronouns and definite articles. All of those things are fun. And if you begin to think of it as ways of really understanding the original text, it doesn't become something that's arduous. It becomes something that you get to do, not that you have to do. I always thought of Greek as something I was able to do, not something I had to do. It was never, something I dreaded. I loved it, and to this day, it's the most fun subject that if I have an option to discuss something, this is the subject that I am most interested in. All right, Module 3, let's talk about this week's assignment. Now, when you look at the assignment, you might think immediately, I'm not ready to parse a word. And you might not be able to. And that's why I'm doing a lot of this with you and to give you practice on how to do it so you can go to your resource that you're using and utilize that cursor over that word and begin to begin to understand some of the functions of a noun. So we're in the subject of nouns. We're in the second week of our discussion on nouns, and our assignment is looking at case, which you should be somewhat familiar with now, and the significance of number, singular or plural, and gender. And remember, in Greek we have masculine, we have neuter, and we have feminine. And what does all of that mean? Then I want you to see that there are ways by using our resources that we can find the lexical meaning. Now, if you have Logos, you have access to multiple lexicons. If you go to Bible Hub, you can just click on the number above the word, and it'll take you to a lexicon somewhat capability, and you can at least look at some variations of meaning, and we want to consider that a little bit, and then how that word might be translated into English. And so you're at the beginning of now looking really at a Greek text. Now, all of this is predicated on knowing the alphabet. If you don't know the alphabet, if you really haven't taken the time to really connect sounds with letters, then this is going to be a much more complex um, time. For instance, I've listed 5 Greek words that I want you to sound out. You don't have to know these words. The uh, the um, the assignment is pretty simple because you can use your book. So nothing is requiring you to memorize anything. But we have words like logon, like mathetai, douloi, gune, tekna. Okay, so let's just rehearse a little bit of our pronunciation. Not that we're ever going to pronounce these words. It's not a spoken language. We're going to read these words, translate these words. But look at the first one, and it's in your assignment section. Logon, lam the la short o, log on, and the root of that word is log, and the ending identifier lets us know that it is a particular case, number, and gender. In this case, it's on. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I'm going to show it to you in the book in just a second. Then we have kind of a little bit more of an irregular mathe tie. Comes the word disciples. In this case, it's in the plural, and it is ma. You got the th sound in the theta, ma theta, theta eta, ma the, and then the ending tie. Okay. Then you have loy, which comes from the Greek word doulos. It's a servant, slave, servant by choice. And the omicron upsilon ending is identifying that it's a particular case. Same thing with gune and tekna. Now, logon is the word for word. Mathite is disciples. Douloi, servant. Gune, woman, or in this case, woman, and then tekna, children. All right. So these are good words to begin to learn. You don't have to memorize. The goal of this assignment is, can you sound out these words? Now, I do the same thing, guys, with my 4th graders every day. We look at words. We're blending letters. We're identifying vowels and how vowels work independently of one another, how vowels, when they're paired together, we call them diphthongs, the same thing as we do in English. And there are 2 vowels that make one sound. And we see this quite a bit in the Greek language. And so I'm amazed that every day as I interact, and I'm dealing basically with students where English is their second language. And so there's just really a language gap. These are not regular English speaking students. They're fluent in Spanish. They're trying to learn English. And so I really have to break down words and talk about blending, talk about the role of consonants and vowels. And every day that I'm doing it, I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly the way you learn Greek. It's just really no difference, right? And so I want you to understand that this is a process. 8 weeks is just an introduction. It is, I hope that it will encourage you to read more and study more, because it really is a lifetime journey. But it's the journey of a lifetime, and it's wonderful. So I'm also going to read a little bit of John 1:1. Let me come back to that later. But now, in your textbook, I want to show you some things about the textbook. In chapter 3, which is where some of our focus will be this week, it's case functions made simple. What you're going to read here, and it's really not as relevant to you maybe as the first chapter 2. Chapter 3 is expanding on cases and telling you, yes, the nominative might mean the subject, but there are other functions of the nominative case. That's not something you need to be interested in at this time, but it's nice to know that that's there. It'll tell you that the genitive case might be a genitive of possession, but it's also going to show you that it might be a genitive of relationship, or an attributive genitive, or apposition, a genitive of comparison. No, not anything you should become all that engaged in, but to know that there are different functions of the genitive case. We'll see this with the dative case. We see this with the accusative case. Accusative case. The goal of this module is just to become aware, where in my textbook do I find that information? I showed you last week. I've begun to tab my sections of grammar in this textbook for easy access. Now, if you go back to chapter 2, and a lot of these charts can be overwhelming. For instance, on page 22 and 23, you see all of these different charts, and they're full of endings, and they're dealing with first declension, second declension nouns. The good thing about this class, you don't have to memorize those things. We had to memorize them in Greek, and that is helpful. But you don't have to do all of that. I'm going to show you an easy way to help identify, when you're reading and using your resource, how to identify gender, number, and case with nouns, and that's by understanding the breakdown of the definite article. It's really it's going to be like a cheat sheet that if you keep it with you close, it'll really help you identify nouns, at least nouns that have an article. It'll help you by trying to determine its case, its number, and its gender. I just look at the article that precedes it, because the article and the noun have to agree in those three areas. I'm going to share that with you today, and I think it'll be a great help to you. But keep in mind, our goal is not to memorize all the endings, right? Even when you are parsing words like in our assignment, lagon, mathetai, tekna, douloi. The goal is just to get familiar with a Greek word, and then understand that it has a root, and it has an ending, and the way the ending is telling us its grammatical function in a sentence. Once again, guys, I cannot overemphasize this. This is not something you have to memorize. You just have to know where to go in the book and find the answer. Let me give you an example. If I turn to page 21, look at 21 and look at this chart right here. Right here. See this chart? See this chart? Now, this chart is going to aid me in parsing some of the words that are in our assignment list. For instance, look at the first one, lagon. They're using the word theos, which is God, but notice the endings in the singular form of nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. The endings that identify nominative is os, omicron. Theta eta is going to stay consistent in this line. I want you to see what I'm looking at in this line. But I want you to notice what's different are the endings. Theos, right beside nominative. I'm on page 21 looking at this chart. In the genitive, it's theou. In the dative, it's theo. And notice how you have some inflection symbols above and beneath the omega. Let's not worry about that right now. And then in the accusative, you have theon. Now, they're singular endings for first declension nouns. And then you have in the plural, theoi, you have theon, you have theois, and theus. And that's the plural. So you have singular and plural. So when I look at like a word lagon, I go back to this chart, and I see on is the accusative singular. All right. I don't know if that helps you exegetically, but that's how you identify the specific grammatical function of that word in a sentence. So when I see the word lagon, I know that it's functioning as the direct object, because that's what the accusative is doing. It's receiving the action of the verb, and it's in the singular. Okay? That's that's helpful to me, right? I guess it is. If I look at the word douloi, I noticed that Dulu. If I look at the word Dulu, I may have mispronounced that earlier. I'm thinking about its lexical form rather than maybe the form that I'm reading. The Omicron upsilon ending is genitive. Theou, Dulu, Theou, Dulu, and it's telling me it's a genitive. So in this case, is the word God functioning as the source, as the possessor? And so I can go to chapter 3 and look at the different functions of the genitive case, and it absolutely has interpretive value. Okay, now let me stop. This does not get overwhelming. I began in week 1 learning the alphabet, so I'm able to. I should be able to. All right. Again, we usually had 2 days to learn the alphabet, and we kept moving. And there was no. I didn't give myself. Um, I didn't allow myself not to learn the alphabet. I learned the alphabet. I learned it, and I associated sounds with letters. Now you have to do that if you're interested in being as a student who can utilize the Greek language. So that is not the lesson to not master. You have to identify sounds with the letters. Now, if you can do that, you might not know what the word is, but at least you can pronounce it. All right. And so by looking at endings and identify endings with cases, you don't have to memorize that. You can use your book. If I could have used my book in Greek, which has all the answers, I would have never made anything but 100. Why? Because all the answers are in my book. You don't have to memorize these things. I don't think it's necessary to memorize all these things. It only is helpful that you can go to your textbook to explain what these things are and what do these endings tell you as a researcher and as a student, and most importantly, as a teacher and as a preacher, right? So we're learning this week that there are endings that identify whether a noun is nominative, accusative, dative, um, you know, all of that. So if it's nominative, if it's genitive, dative, or accusative, I know that by the ending of. I know the root isn't going to change, but the ending is going to change. And it's going to tell me how the word functions within a sentence. All right. Now, you may say that sounds hard. I mean, and I don't know if I'm looking at the right chart. Well, what I want to do is I want to show you a simple way to help identify nouns. And that is by going to page 118 and look. I'm sorry, I got everything backwards here. Look at the chart on the definite article. Page 118. Go to page 118. I take my yellow highlighter, and boy, do I take my yellow highlighter and I highlight the borders of this graph, this chart. Look, I have it now in yellow. Why? Because that is an important chart. And if you look at the chart, it's the same endings as we saw on the chart that dealt with noun endings. And so if you look at the definite article ha, which is an omicron with a rough breathing mark. A rough breathing mark gives the O sound a ha, ha. The rough breathing mark has an H sound, so instead of ah, it's ha. Instead of ah, if the rough breathing mark, and you can look in your book, and we didn't spend a lot of time, and it's really not all that important unless you want to know that the breathing marks can just maybe affect the inflection of the way it's pronounced, but it's not going to really do much for you as a reader using study tools, because most study tools are going to tell you what the article is, whether it's masculine and whether it's feminine, whether it's neuter, and in what case it is. But I just want you to see that by knowing the definite article chart, every article will tell you everything you need to know about the noun, right? So, and there's a lot of articular nouns in the New Testament, right? So here is a simple way. I say simple. I think is a simple way. Sorry, I'm backwards. To help identify nouns. So what I did and what I still do today is I take the chart on definite articles and I write it on an index card. And in almost every one of my Bibles, I have a definite article index card. And sometimes I'm in church and they're doing announcements or something. And I'll take that card and I'll just rehearse. Tu, to, ton, plural. Hoi, tone, tus, tus. Or tos, toi, tus. The feminine. A, taste, te, tain. Plural. A, tone, taste, tas. Neuter. Ta, tu, to, ta. Ta, tone, tois, ta. You don't have to memorize that. Just know where it is in your grammar book. Make an index card, keep it with you in your Bible, and you can write the chart like this, and you will be able, if you can identify the definite article, you can identify whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. You can identify whether it's singular or plural, and you can identify whether it's nominative, genitive, dative, or accusative by just knowing that chart right there. Words that don't have the definite article might still replicate those endings. So it's just worth your wait to become familiar with the definite article. Okay, now again. You have to memorize it. Put it on an index card and put it somewhere in your Bible and look at it. Sometimes you're in your car waiting for something. Take that out and look at it. I have a professor who was my Hebrew instructor, who he was my Hebrew instructor, and he would always have these index cards in his pocket, and we would, anytime we would just sit around, he's flipping through these index cards, and I said, Dr. Biddle, what are you doing? He says, oh, these are my Greek cards. And he taught Hebrew. I said, what's the purpose? He said, oh, I'm just reminding myself of vocabulary words, of different endings and different grammatical functions. And I said, somebody like that who's been a stellar scholar for 30, 40 years is still doing that. And he's doing that to this day. How much more is it appropriate to have notes? In my Greek New Testament that I take to church every Sunday morning, I have an index card that has the alphabet on it. Why? Because I don't always, like in English, I don't always go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I can recognize the letters. I know what the sounds are, but I don't always say them in order. So I just look at that, and I have Hebrew cards that do the exact same way. Then I have particular cards that I might have pronoun endings. I might have third declension noun endings because I don't remember them like I used to. And I just have them as reminders to me. Now, again, because you're not attempting to memorize all these things, at this point, you know the alphabet, you know that nouns have cases, and today we're going to talk about the significance of number and gender. And really that's it. But a part of identifying the word, if you have Logos or Free Bible Hub, you don't even need to know the definite article, because then all you have to do is put your cursor over the word and it's going to tell you everything that you need to know. But it is fun for me to have that little definite article chart somewhere near me, to where it just reminds me that if I can identify the definite article, I can identify the noun that it is modifying. Okay, so and let's look at this as an example. In our assignment, we're looking at the first part of John 1:1 in arche, hain, ha, lagos. Now look how I pronounce that. Now we don't usually deal with capitals unless they are in the beginning of a sentence, but you have epsilon nu n. It's the preposition in, nrk. Got that hard k sound. To see in beginning, it's like archaic. That's how I remember it. In the beginning was Hain. This is an imperfect verbal form, and we'll talk about the significance of the imperfect. It's really a way of opening up and making this verse come alive. And you have halagos, and halagos. I've already found out that ha is the masculine singular nominative article. So I know lagos is going to follow that. Now, why is that important? What is the subject of this phrase of this phrase? Um, Actually, of this clause, it does contain a subject and a verb. So it's in beginning, in beginning. Notice there is no definite article before the beginning. It's just in. In is not a definite article. It's a preposition. In RK. It's not in the beginning to identify a specific time that this all happened. It's extremely, it's not qualified that way. It's just in beginning. And so it's just like Genesis 1:1, right? In the Hebrew, it's not telling you in the beginning. It's just talking about in the beginning. And the writer is not trying to identify a specific time when creation happens, because it's as if it leaves the reader with in some time in eternity past, God created. Outside of time, created time. And I think that's the point, right? In beginning was, and boy, when I talk to you about the imperfect tense, this is gonna change the way you forever read this verse, right? Was the word. And what's the subject? The word. What's the subject? The word. Now remember, when John uses logos for the word, he's not talking about the Bible. This is used in a completely different way than we see the word logos used in other portions of the New Testament. This is a specific reference, I think, to all the Old Testament references of the Messiah, all kind of merging into this fulfillment of the why, of the purpose, of the one. And what are we going to call this one that all the Old Testament prophesied concerning and all the scriptures look to? He is the Logos. He is the Word. Again, not the Bible. He is the Word, in the sense that John's using this in a way to explain, to capture the essence of all that is said. If we could take everything said about God and somehow place it within a human vocabulary word, it would be the logos. Now, in this passage, again, you don't have to. All you have to have in your logos software or in your free Bible Hub software is to put your cursor over top of the preposition in, and it's going to tell you it's a preposition. It's a preposition that's used with the dative case. You say, well, the dative case. What is the dative case? Go to your grammar here and remind yourself what the dative case is. This is for your study time. It's not for your preaching time. In RK, what is RK? It's a noun. It's in the dative. It's singular. It's feminine. All right. And it just means in beginning, not the beginning. In beginning was, and I'm not going to get into verbs yet, but I will, was the word, not a word. See, if it was indefinite, if there was no article there, we might supply the indefinite article, but there's no indefinite article in Greek. So if the article is not there, sometimes it is appropriate, and that has to be used with some care, but you would supply the indefinite article. So this is not in beginning was, and I'll give you a hint, this imperfect tense is insinuating always in a perpetual state of being, that this one has always been. He's always been being, was the word, not a word, the word. Now, a specific. John is trying to tell you, I'm talking about the one, the word. All right. Very important that we are able to negotiate articles as they're connected now to nouns. So whereas our writer puts articles later in the book, we jump from the 23, 24 to 118. I would put the article very much with our noun study because they're just so closely related, right? Because nouns don't function outside. They can function by themselves, but they, even when they're substantive, they still describe um, the grammatical functions of a noun. They function as a noun even when they're by themselves. So NRK, that's a noun, it's dative, singular, feminine, was the word, the, ha, definite article, then logos, noun, nominative, which means it's the subject. That's a significant part of this clause. Singular, masculine. Okay, that's just being a good reader. That's understanding the grammar of the text, and it's helpful. Now, what is the significance of logos in this part of the scripture? Is that it's given us the theological content or context that John is talking about. Here's the emphasis, the word. He wants the emphasis not to be on beginning. That's not the emphasis. The emphasis is not time. The emphasis that the word always was. And that's what John is trying to communicate to us in this first chapter, which mirrors the Hebrew of Genesis 1:1. So to bring together both testaments, and I often say it's not really Old and New Testament, it's First Testament and Second Testament. Okay, one is not irrelevant because the new came, because there's no way of understanding the new without the second, without the first. Matter of fact, John is telling us that the halagos is the Old Testament revelation of God. And if you don't know the Old Testament revelation of God, you won't understand what John's doing in John 1:1. Okay. So let's talk about. I'm not going to get into parsing and breaking down these words. It's so fun and it's so insightful. But let's go back kind of to build our grammar part of this module. Um, when I put my cursor over the word like RK, it is telling me that it is singular and that it is feminine. All right. Now, so the nominative part tells me it's a subject. The dative part tells me that it's functioning as an indirect object. Okay, and so it is informing this verse, right? And I can go to my textbook to look at all the different ways the dative might be used, which is going to elaborate more on how I understand beginning. But why is number and gender a part of my noun study? It's part of your noun study because every noun has gender and every noun has number. So the the Greek noun is important because it's important when number is given to us to like, for instance, children, not child, women, not woman. All right. So obviously, singular and plural. I don't have to explain that to you. That's important. And the fact that words are categorized as masculine, feminine, and neuter. All right. So let's back up for a second. Nouns are described are people, a person, place, or thing. Now, animal, and they have gender. Now, this has nothing to do with biology. All right, so you got to begin to think not like if a word is neuter, it has some type of biological significance, masculine or feminine. Now, there are times where the masculine article might be used by itself to denote men, and the feminine article could function by itself without a corresponding noun, and it would imply the women. But most of the time, gender is a matter of category, of ways to categorize, right? Just like first declension, second declension, third declension nouns. It's a way of grouping nouns that are similar together in form. It has nothing to do with how they're understood within a given context. It has nothing to do with interpretation. It just has to do with how to categorize words grammatically. So begin to de-emphasize words that have feminine gender, as if that feminine gender is saying something about its biological significance within a passage. So one of the most important things I can say to you today is that understand that gender is category, but it is not a matter of biology. All right. So when I look at um, articles, articles modify nouns, and when they're put together, like in John 1:1, the ha, logos, the article and the noun must agree in case, number, and gender. They always agree. That's why I learned to identify the article, and that helps me identify the noun. Now, let's go back for a second and reinforce the importance of the article, right? Because the article, though it is a small word, it has huge impact when it comes to the scripture, especially how we understand the noun that it modifies. Let me give you a couple examples, right? In John 10:11, in John chapter 10, verse 11, Jesus said, I am, that's a Johannine expression, ego eimi, I am the good shepherd. So the definite article is identifying Jesus not as a good shepherd, as if he's one of many. The definite article wants you to see, no, John is saying, this is the good shepherd. This is the way, the truth, the life, John 14:6, right? He's not just a way. He's not just a light shining in the darkness, right? He's just not a truth amongst many truths. But the writer is specifically identifying the noun. And sometimes the noun could be like ha anthropos, anthropology, it's a study of man. Ha anthropos is the man. So if I said to you, if we were all together at Emmanuel University, if I said to you at 1 o'clock tomorrow, meet me in a room, and you're going to say, which room? I said, just meet me in a room. Well, there's a lot of rooms. At least it was when I was a student there, right? There were a lot of rooms. What room were you talking about? But if I said to you, meet me in the room, you will know that I'm referring to a specific room, and for me to say the room would imply that you know what I'm talking about. And that's what happens in the Greek text. The definite article helps you understand that there is a already existing understanding of the qualifying noun that is being modified. But there's also these abstract concepts that are really, really important. For instance, when you see the word pistis, which is faith, in the New Testament. Now, this is not be careful with anybody tells you, well, this always means this and this always means that. No, it doesn't. You're going to learn. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's just not the way language functions. Oh, it always means. No, it doesn't. And I tell young preachers this all the time. Logos means the general word, and rhema means a specific word. And all I have to, I look, every time I hear somebody say that, I say, no, it doesn't. That's foolish, because all you have to do is look at how words are used, and rhema sometimes is used synonymously with logos. Logos is used synonymously with rhema. So in a particular context, there may be a distinction between the words, but just its lexical forms does not say every time you see the word logos outside of John 1 through 18, outside of John 1 through 18, logos means the word, but so does rhema, or means word. If it has an article, it means the word. If it doesn't have the article, it could just mean a word, just like rhema can mean a word, but it doesn't mean every time you see rhema, that's a revelation word. No, that's not the way language works. And no, that's not very good exegesis at all. And I can tell you many, 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 many words that are that way. I always tell people, there's concepts that we use in English that are not Jewish concepts at all. For instance, when people say, oh, Dr. Crocker, you got a head knowledge, but you got to have a heart knowledge. Well, that just tells me you don't understand Hebrew and Greek, because there's no distinction between the head and the heart in either Hebrew or Greek. The Jewish idea of man is that we didn't compartmentalize. That's a Greek thought, but it wasn't the Jewish thought of man. And so my head knowledge, my heart knowledge should not be separated. It's all part of the same function of my life, of my soul. Recently, our pastors are teaching on the soul, and I wrote a 3-page excursion on be careful when you use the word soul, and this, 5-cent definition. It means the mind, will, and emotions. And if you have any kind of lexicon, you will find that that is not an adequate definition at all for the variations of the word soul. And so nouns function by context, not necessarily by lexical meaning. And I say that to say, you can't always say, oh, this word always means, that word always means. That's not the way grammar works. Grammar, words have function, use, and the use is much more important than its lexical meaning. That's why when, maybe we'll get to it later, but in your final project, when you break down John 3:16, the lexical meaning of the word is not necessarily, you can say agape is the God kind of love. For God, so agape, the God kind of love. But I would caution you that you may have read that somewhere, but in the wild, in the text itself, it does not always mean the God kind of love at all, right? And so you can't make these definite statements that do not reflect the way language is used, okay? Back to this abstract concept. Sometimes I see the word faith, and when it doesn't have a definite article, it's probably a reference to your belief system, faith in God, faith in God. Whereas if I'm contending for the faith, I'm not contending for my subjective trust in God, but the faith is probably a reference to a body of doctrine that the church held to be truth, right? So when I see the word faith, I'm always going to the Greek text. Is this a noun that has a definite article? So the definite article not only helps us identify case, number, and gender, the noun that it modifies, but it also helps us exegetically to identify if that particular noun is being set apart. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. For instance, with proper names, many times in the New Testament, it's the Jesus, the Christ, but we don't translate it that way because that is performing a grammatical function, but has very little exegetical relevance to it. I mean, I don't always have to say the Jesus as if this is. Now, there were many people named Jesus, but I don't think that's what the writer is attempting to do. It becomes a function of identifying the subject of the sentence. And so having the definite article, don't just overlook that once you start reading more in the Greek text, or even if you can't read fully the Greek text, you can take your mouse, you can identify what's happening in a verse that you're teaching or preaching. So you have what are called articular nouns. This is nouns that have a definite article, but then there's the word anarthrous, Anarthrous. Anarthrous means this is a noun that does not have an article, okay? And we see that again in John 1:1, where the next phrase says, and God was the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. That initial theos does not have a definite article. When we don't read a God was the Word. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You don't just automatically supply the uh, the the indefinite article. That's why you got to be careful. And with any language, you learn a rule, doesn't mean the rule is like that all the way. But it does tell me that that word is functioning, theos. It's referencing noun, subject, but it's not necessary to identify the have a direct object, and there's grammatical reasons why it's not necessary. But God was, there's that imperfect verb, and then you have the ha logos again, which is um, the word. And again, this goes back to understanding, and you can read this on page 118. There's really some excellent discussion on the use of what the article can do, and what the function, how the article functions. There's a lot of really good information on the use of the article, and I would encourage you to take a few minutes to read that, or at least know where, put on your tab definite article in your textbook, so you'll know where to resource that. Okay, and so the ability to look at a noun that doesn't have an article, and it might be referring to its qualitative function, the quality of God was the word. That means the word in all quality and in essence and in full humanity. As we know, the word is going to become flesh and is going to tabernacle among men, going to take on flesh. John 1:18, we know that's going to happen. And it's important in the first verse to know that in every sense of the way humans we think, the word is God. And that's what I think John 1:1 is doing. And so look at the article without necessarily becoming so preoccupied by it that we make too much out of the article. But do know, and this is going to be a rule throughout Greek, know that rules exist, but be careful in the practical application, because context is always key, not rules of grammar. Context is always um, key. Now, a few things before we stop. I mentioned John 10:11. This is a great use of the art. Go through the I am sayings of Jesus in the Johannine Gospel, and you will see that those descriptions, those noun forms that describe Jesus, always have the definite article, because what John is saying, there is nobody like this Jesus, and I think that's part of John's theological argument. Um, so as far as preaching with precision, um, Christ is the good shepherd. As far as doctrinal clarity, John 14:6, um, Jesus is not a way among others, but the only way, the truth, and the life. And again, in the culture of religious pluralism, even amongst scholars, I mean, a lot of my scholar friends believe that there's every religion has their own way to God, and Christianity is just one of many. In our tradition, that's not what we believe. We believe Jesus is the only way, the one mediator between God and man, Jesus, who is the Christ. And I think John is telling us that, right? And then John 1:1, let's go back, helps us with our Christology. Right? Is Jesus just a way? Is Jesus just a man? Is Jesus just a prophet? Is he just someone sent by God, or is Jesus God? Again, that is significant in the early church, as they fought in councils and established creeds to identify, um, right, Arianism, and the whole Nicene Creed is helping us to somehow understand the function of the Trinity and the function of the role of Jesus. Hebrews 1:3 just helps us to kind of straighten out our Christology. And guess what? Sometimes the article helps us do that. So articles, they're more than just the. They can be theological highlighters, right? And that's relative to exclusivity, to specificity. Um, yeah, check out the articles in front of the nouns. Now, let me end this way. Nouns what have we learned in 2 weeks? Well, we learned that nouns have cases. They identify their function, right? Because in a sentence, don't put the accent and the emphasis on the wrong thing. Nominative nouns are subjects. Genitive nouns are talking about possession or origin, source, right? Have faith, Mark 11, have faith in God. And I heard somebody teach the other day, oh, this could be in the genitive, have the faith of God. Well, see, I think I have a theological problem with that. Now, the genitive can mean possession, the faith belonging to God. So God has faith. My question is, well, why does God need faith? Right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That we have faith, and faith always requires an object. Faith is always in. We place it like a container. We take water, we put it in a container. Something has to contain faith. And our faith has to be in the object of God. Well, if God has faith, who does God turn to? Well, God turns to himself, and God has faith in himself. I just think that's a logical fallacy. So when I hear people say, have the faith of God based on Mark, Mark 11, 22 or 23, somewhere, I always say, I don't think it's theologically correct. Just because grammatically the genitive can mean that whole possession, have the kind of faith that belongs to God. I think it's better rendered have faith in the object of God, which is also one of the functions of the genitive case. Okay, so understand case, its significance in a sentence. It'll lead you to where you want to go exegetically. And if you do nothing else this week, just rehearse cases, functions, and sentences, and realize that definite article is a small word with huge impacts. Don't stress. You do not need to memorize anything. Everything you need to know is under your cursor. I promise you. But understanding what's under your cursor will help you understand how to interpret the text. All right, Dr. Crocker here. I'm here any evening. Give me a holler, give me a call, email me, phone. I'd love to talk to you about some of these things. Make sure we're all together. Don't be overwhelmed. Nothing in this class should overwhelm you because you have the book. Just walk with me as close as you can. Dr. Crocker is saying, appreciate you. Look forward to module 3. It only gets better from here, I promise. Have a good week, my friends. Thank you.